Donald Trump is losing it as the video he feared has now been released. Iran dropped a new Lego animation video within 30 minutes of the White House correspondents' dinner incident, and it landed like a precision strike on everything Trump had spent the week trying to project. The clip mocked him for banning comedians, for empty plates, for the full SWAT evacuation, and for what it described as a fragile ego that cannot handle being in the same room as a real joke, let alone a real threat. And Trump's reaction to all of it in the 60 Minutes interview with Norah O'Donnell the following morning was an absolute disaster in ways that went far beyond one awkward answer or one uncomfortable question. Before we get into every layer of this, let's establish the facts clearly and without flinching. On Saturday, April 25, 2026, at the Washington Hilton Hotel, the President of the United States was rushed off stage by Secret Service agents while shots rang out from a security checkpoint just outside the ballroom. Vice President J.D. Vance was rushed to safety. First Lady Melania Trump was rushed to safety. Members of the cabinet, including HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Dr. Mehmet Oz, were evacuated. House Speaker Mike Johnson was pulled from the building. Hundreds of journalists, celebrities, and political officials dove under tables in the most chaotic scene any White House correspondents' dinner has produced in its 84-year history. A Secret Service officer was shot and saved by his bulletproof vest. The suspect, identified by federal authorities as Cole Thomas Allen, a 31-year-old California man holding a master's degree in computer science, armed with a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives, had checked into the Washington Hilton the night before and referred to himself in writings sent to family members minutes before the incident as the friendly federal assassin. He was subdued by law enforcement and is now in federal custody awaiting arraignment. Trump was uninjured. Melania was uninjured. Vance was uninjured. The cabinet was uninjured. I want to be absolutely clear about something before this analysis goes any further. Political violence is unacceptable. Full stop. We do not celebrate it. We do not minimize it. We do not treat it as karma or entertainment or deserved consequence. We treat it the way every person who cares about democratic civilization should treat any attempt to harm any president, as the line that cannot be crossed. I am glad the President, the Vice President, the First Lady, every journalist in that ballroom, and the Secret Service officer who was shot are all alive this morning. That is the only acceptable place to begin this conversation. And from that starting point, there is a great deal left to discuss. Iran had the Lego video ready and posted within 30 minutes of the incident. Within 45 minutes, the mocking was already spreading across international social media. The clip portrayed Trump as controlling every detail of the dinner while still watching the entire event collapse around him. It called him a fragile snowflake who banned comedians because he cannot handle the smoke, and then had the whole venue SWAT evacuated anyway. The message being delivered was straightforward. You tried to control every variable and the chaos still found you. Then Iran dropped another video mocking Trump's diplomatic collapse with Pakistan and Iran's refusal to attend talks in Islamabad. That clip portrayed the United States as desperate, sitting alone at a negotiating table while Iran simply ghosted the meeting entirely. And the message on that one was equally simple. If you are in a great negotiating position, you do not adopt the other side's 10-point framework and then pretend you wrote it yourself. Iran made it publicly clear they had no intention of attending any negotiations while the naval blockade remained in place. Trump posted on Truth Social that talks were happening. Iran responded by releasing a video called "Ghost in the Empire." This is the environment in which the White House correspondents' dinner shooting occurred. The Trump administration was already in a state of cascading structural collapse before a single shot was fired on Saturday night. The Navy Secretary was fired in the middle of an active naval blockade. The Supreme Court ruled his signature tariff policy unconstitutional. The federal government began processing $166 billion in refunds to American importers. Trump invoked the Defense Production Act to take ownership of Spirit Airlines, an airline collapsing partly because of his own jet fuel inflation from his own war in Iran. Marjorie Taylor Greene went on CNN calling for the 25th Amendment. Jamie Raskin filed a formal letter with the White House physician demanding a neuropsychological examination with a deadline of April 24, 2026, 3 days before the dinner. His own niece, his own nephew, his own former White House lawyer, his own former primetime cable defender, all publicly questioning his cognitive fitness. That is the context in which Cole Thomas Allen charged a Secret Service checkpoint at the Washington Hilton. Now let's talk about what happened in Trump's 60 Minutes interview the following morning, because this is where the disaster inside the disaster began. Norah O'Donnell asked Trump about the shooter's manifesto. The manifesto references administration officials as targets and includes a line about no longer being willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to coat the writer's hands with crimes. O'Donnell read the passage aloud and asked for Trump's reaction. What followed was one of the most telling moments of the entire interview, not because of what Trump said, but because of what he immediately assumed she was asking. He did not wait for her to finish the question. He erupted. He said he was not a rapist. He said he was not a pedophile. He called her horrible people. He called her a disgrace for reading it. He demanded she stop. He pointed at the other side as the ones connected to Epstein. Nobody in that interview had yet said those specific words applied to him. That reaction was not the response of someone who heard a question and answered it. That was the response of someone who heard the question and already knew exactly what they were afraid was inside it. You do not sprint to deny an accusation that has not yet been made unless some part of you already understands why the accusation would be credible. That is not a political observation. That is simple human psychology playing out on national television in front of millions of viewers, and every person watching it in real time understood exactly what they were watching. Trump then attacked O'Donnell personally, called the 60 Minutes broadcast a disgrace, and demanded the interview continue, all in the same breath. It was chaotic, defensive, and revealing in the specific way that only genuine panic can be revealing. Calculated actors do not accidentally sprint toward the accusation they want to deny. They wait for it to arrive and then address it on their terms. Trump skipped that entire process. Then came the question about him falling on the floor during the evacuation. Trump's explanation was that Secret Service agents asked him to go down to the floor, and that he complied at their request. He said the agents asked him to get down. O'Donnell asked whether that meant they wanted the president and first lady to basically crawl out of the room, and Trump essentially confirmed that version while simultaneously insisting it was dignified because he was following instructions. The video footage of the actual moment tells a different story. Trump fell. His team is now working overtime to transform a fall into a tactical crouch performed at the specific professional request of highly trained federal agents. The effort is almost impressive in its audacity. What makes the entire 60 Minutes interview so significant is not just what Trump said or how he said it, but what it revealed about how the administration intends to manage the narrative going forward. Every uncomfortable fact becomes a lie. Every uncomfortable question becomes a personal attack on the questioner. Every uncomfortable visual becomes a misrepresentation by the fake news. The pattern is so consistent and so reflexive at this point that it has become its own form of self-exposure. People who are genuinely confident in the truth do not need to attack the format, the journalist, the network, and the question simultaneously before providing an answer. Now let's address what is happening in conservative media regarding Jimmy Kimmel, because it needs to be confronted directly. Kimmel delivered his alternative White House Correspondents' Dinner monologue on Thursday, April 23rd, 2 days before the actual dinner, because the WHCA had decided not to book a comedian. They hired a mentalist instead. Kimmel treated this as the story it was, pointed out that the President of the United States is apparently too emotionally fragile to sit through a comedian telling jokes at his expense, and then delivered the monologue the dinner should have featured. The monologue included a joke about Melania Trump having a glow like an expectant widow. It included a joke that she would celebrate her birthday at home, looking out a window and whispering, "What have I done?" These are dark jokes. They are designed to be dark. Late-night political comedy has always operated in that register. When Johnny Carson made jokes about Nixon, when Saturday Night Live did Reagan, when every major comedian has ever held a mirror up to power using discomfort as the glass. That is the tradition. That is the purpose. Fox News is now running Kimmel's Melania expectant widow joke alongside footage of the shooting and framing the juxtaposition as evidence of culpability. Melania Trump has publicly called for Kimmel to be fired. The White House is amplifying the demand. ABC faces pressure from the same administration that already used FCC complaints to threaten Kimmel's broadcast, that already caused Sinclair and Nexstar affiliates to preempt his show, that already used a man's attempted assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania, as a reason to demand he be removed from the air. Let's be completely clear about what this argument is and what it is not. It is not a serious claim about causation. Kimmel making a dark joke about Melania does not put a weapon in anyone's hand. The people who understood this perfectly when a leftist gunman shot Steve Scalise at a congressional baseball practice in 2017 are now choosing to forget it for political convenience. The people who understood this perfectly when Thomas Crooks fired at Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania in 2024 are now choosing to forget it because the target has changed. That is not a principled position. That is selective outrage performing as moral concern. What this argument actually is a continuation of the same campaign the administration has been running against independent media, against late-night comedy, against any voice that refuses to operate as a state-approved stenographer. The goal is not accountability for Kimmel. The goal is the silencing of dissent through reputational punishment, regulatory pressure, and the blunt instrument of public outrage manufactured and directed from inside the White House. That is what we are watching. Not justice, not accountability, not genuine moral concern about the climate of political violence, which would require Trump to also examine his own rhetoric about enemies of the state, about hanging traitors, about people deserving whatever they get. That examination is not coming. And the final thing worth saying about Norah O'Donnell's interview is perhaps the most important. After Trump called her a disgrace, after he attacked the network, after he yelled at her for asking a question about a document that was directly relevant to the biggest news story of the week, she closed the interview by thanking him for attending the dinner and honoring his commitment. She told him the White House Correspondents Association very much appreciated his presence. She praised him for showing up. He had just called her horrible. He had just said she should be ashamed of herself. And she responded by thanking him for attending a dinner where a man with a shotgun tried to breach the security perimeter. That moment, more than the Iran Lego video, more than the manifesto, more than the falling clip, more than any single data point from this entire chaotic weekend, that moment tells you everything you need to know about why corporate media cannot be trusted to hold this administration accountable. When a journalist thanks the subject who just insulted her on camera for showing up to the event where an armed man tried to kill him, something has broken in the relationship between the press and power that goes far deeper than one awkward sign-off. The answer to that broken relationship is what this channel exists to be: independent, fully sourced, unafraid to say what the corporate networks are contractually, financially, and institutionally unable to say. What happened Saturday night at the Washington Hilton was serious. A man with weapons got past the first layer of security at one of the most heavily guarded events in Washington. A Secret Service officer was shot. The president was evacuated off stage. These facts demand a real security review, a real congressional briefing, and real answers about how Cole Thomas Allen got that close. What happened Sunday morning on 60 Minutes was also serious. A president who cannot hear a question about a manifesto without immediately defending himself against accusations the questioner had not yet made. A president who turned a fall into a tactical maneuver. A president who attacked the journalist and then watched her thank him for his time. Jamie Raskin, in the middle of all of this, did the one thing that actually mattered. He redirected the conversation toward gun violence, toward the 275 to 300 people who are shot every day in this country, toward the school children who process trauma with nothing, toward the decades of inaction while mass shootings have become so routine they barely interrupt a news cycle for more than 48 hours before the next one arrives. Every Republican on Capitol Hill is now demanding a ballroom. A renovated, purpose-built ballroom at the White House would have kept everyone safer on Saturday night, they say. And I want to ask every single one of those members one question. If a ballroom is the answer to keeping powerful people safe from gun violence in Washington, what is the answer for the children in every school in America who have been processing active shooter drills since they were old enough to know what a lockdown means? Where is the ballroom bill for them? Where has the Republican Party been for every Sandy Hook, every Uvalde, every Parkland, every classroom full of children who did not have a Secret Service detail and a bulletproof vest? You cannot demand ballroom security for power and offer thoughts and prayers to everyone else. That is not a position. That is a hierarchy. And the hierarchy says certain lives require infrastructure and certain lives require condolences. And the dividing line between those two categories has nothing to do with innocence or vulnerability or deserve. The people who caused what happened Saturday night are still being investigated. The FBI is doing its work. We should let them do it carefully, fully, and without political interference from an administration that has already demonstrated its willingness to weaponize federal law enforcement against its enemies while protecting its friends. Iran will keep dropping videos. The manifesto will keep being analyzed. The fall will keep circulating. The 60 Minutes interview will keep being dissected. The Kimmel controversy will keep being amplified by people who need a target that is easier to attack than the actual problems this country is facing. And underneath all of that noise, the real story remains exactly what it has been for months. An administration in structural collapse trying to manage the perception of competence, while the evidence of incompetence accumulates faster than any press office can spin it. A media ecosystem too compromised to report it fully. And an independent press, funded by viewers, not by corporate advertisers or regulatory goodwill or presidential access, trying to connect every piece of it before the next explosion arrives, which, at the current pace of this administration, means we will be back here again very shortly. Stay subscribed, stay paying attention, and share this with someone who needs to understand exactly how we got here, because the only thing more dangerous than chaos is chaos that nobody is watching closely enough to document.